I spent 20 years paying for my granddaughter's education. On graduation day, she looked me in the eyes and pretended not to know me. I wish I could tell you that was the most painful moment of my life. It wasn't. The worst part came 3 minutes later, when she introduced someone else as the person who had always believed in her. If you're listening today, let me ask you something. Have you ever spent years sacrificing for someone, only to become the one person they wished would disappear? Because that's exactly what happened to me. My name is Evelyn Brooks. I'm 73 years old. I spent most of my life working as a school secretary in Savannah, Georgia. Nothing glamorous, nothing people would call successful. Just 42 years of arriving before sunrise, unlocking office doors, answering phones, filing paperwork, and making sure children had someone smiling at them before classes began. People remembered the principals. They remembered the teachers. Nobody remembered the secretary. And I was perfectly fine with that. Because when I come home every evening, there was one little girl waiting for me. Her name was Maya. She was 4 years old when she came into my life permanently. Tiny braids, big brown eyes, always carrying a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. She used to run across my living room shouting, "Grandma, guess what I learned today?" Those memories still live inside me, even now. Back then, I truly believed love was enough. I believed if you poured enough kindness into someone's life, they'd never forget who filled the cup. I was wrong. Maya's mother, my daughter Angela, had her when she was only 19. Angela tried. Lord knows she tried. But life kept knocking her down. Dead-end jobs, bad relationships, bills that multiplied faster than paychecks. Eventually, she came to my front door one rainy evening with Maya asleep in the back seat. "I just need help for a little while, Mama." That's what she told me. A little while. That little while became 20 years. Angela stayed involved. She loved her daughter. But the responsibility, the school meetings, the homework, the doctor appointments, the groceries, birthday parties, the piano lessons, tutoring, late night fevers, those became mine. And I never complained, not once, because every time Maya smiled, I felt like God had given me another reason to wake up. Money was always tight, very tight. My salary barely covered my own expenses. So I learned how to stretch every dollar until it practically cried. I stopped buying new clothes. I wore the same winter coat for 16 years. The sleeves had begun to fray. I stitched them myself. My coworkers used to joke, "Evelyn, when are you finally going shopping?" I'd laugh and tell them, "This coat still works." What I never admitted was that every dollar I didn't spend went somewhere else, into an account Maya didn't even know existed. Every paycheck, I deposited something, sometimes $20, sometimes 50, sometimes only 10, but I never skipped a month, not once, because I had made myself a promise. One day, my granddaughter will graduate from college without owing anyone a single penny. No student loans, no debt collectors, no years of struggling the way her mother had. I wanted to give her a future, even if it meant giving up pieces of mine. People thought I was foolish. My younger sister Denise certainly did. "Evelyn," she'd say every Thanksgiving, "you keep acting like she's your responsibility." I'd smile. "She is." "No," Denise would reply. "She's your granddaughter, not your daughter." Maybe she was right. Maybe I crossed that line years ago. But once you've tucked a little girl into bed every night, kissed scraped knees, sat through nightmares, held her hand during vaccinations, and stayed awake while she slept through fevers, those titles stop mattering. Granddaughter, daughter, child. Love doesn't care about vocabulary. As Maya grew older, she became brilliant, straight A student, honor society, student council. She loved science. She wanted to become an engineer. I didn't even fully understand what engineers actually did. But every time she talked about designing bridges, her eyes sparkled, so I listened. even when I didn't understand, especially then. By the time high school ended, acceptance letters started arriving. I still remember the day the biggest envelope came. She screamed before she even opened it. I got in! She hugged me so hard I almost dropped my coffee. Scholarship money covered part of it, but not enough. The remaining tuition, housing, books, meal plans, fees, they added up to more money than I'd ever imagined spending. That's when I emptied the education account. Every dollar I'd saved for 2 decades, just over $180,000. 20 years gone with one signature. People think writing a check like that feels painful. It didn't. It felt beautiful, because I wasn't losing money. I was watching 20 years become reality. Maya cried that day. She wrapped her arms around me. I'll never forget this, Grandma. Those were her exact words. I'll never forget. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? Every semester, I'd mail care packages, cookies, homemade banana bread, little handwritten notes, sometimes $20 tucked inside a birthday card, sometimes 50. Even after tuition, even after retirement. I wanted her to know someone back home believed in her. She called less often as college went on. I told myself that was normal. Young people get busy. Classes, internships, friends, life. Whenever weeks passed without hearing from her, I'd be the one to call. Sometimes she'd answer. Sometimes she'd text back hours later. Sorry, Grandma, busy. Just one word, busy. I accepted it every time, because love often makes excuses before it accepts reality. Then came graduation. The invitation arrived in a thick, cream-colored envelope. I read it 5 times. Bachelor of Engineering, Class of 2025, reserved family seating. I cried before I even finished reading. Not because I was sad, because I was proud. Prouder than words could ever explain. For weeks, I counted the days. I bought a navy blue dress, the nicest one I'd owned in years. I even treated myself to getting my hair professionally done, something I hadn't done since retiring. When I looked in the mirror, I smiled. Not because I looked younger, because I looked like someone attending the happiest day of her life. I had no idea, by the end of that afternoon, I'd discover 20 years of sacrifice could be erased with one sentence. And I wasn't the one who said it. The morning of Maya's graduation, I woke up before my alarm. It was 4:30 in the morning. For a moment, I simply lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. After 20 years, the day had finally arrived. I whispered a quiet prayer. Thank you, Lord, we made it. Now she made it. We made it. Because every exam she'd taken, I'd prayed through. Every tuition bill, I'd somehow found a way to pay. Every late-night phone call about difficult classes, I stayed awake until she felt better. This diploma belonged to Maya, but a small piece of it belonged to every sacrifice made behind the scenes. I climbed out of bed and opened my closet. My navy blue dress hung neatly inside a plastic garment bag. I'd bought it nearly 2 months earlier. It wasn't expensive, but it was beautiful. Simple lace sleeves, a pearl brooch on the shoulder. Just elegant enough for a grandmother who wanted to look respectable without drawing attention. I smiled as I ran my fingers across the fabric. This is your day, baby, I whispered. I just want to be there. After showering, I carefully fixed my makeup. Very little. Just enough to brighten tired eyes. Then I fastened the pearl necklace my late husband Harold had given me on our 25th wedding anniversary. I hadn't worn it in years. As I looked at his photograph sitting on my dresser, I smiled. You would have been so proud of her. Sometimes, even after 15 years, I still talk to Harold as though he were in the next room. Perhaps grief never really leaves. It simply learns how to whisper instead of scream. At 7 o'clock sharp, my phone rang. It was Angela. Mama, you ready? I've been ready for weeks. She laughed. I figured. There was excitement in her voice, but also something else, a nervousness I couldn't quite place. "I'll meet you there," she said. "Maya's already on campus with her friends. Tell her I can't wait to hug her." There was a pause. Then Angela answered, "I'm sure you will." The hesitation barely lasted a second, but it stayed with me. After we hung up, I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling settling into my chest. I blamed it on excitement. Big days make people emotional. That had to be it. Before leaving, I picked up the bouquet sitting in a vase on my kitchen table. Red and white roses, Maya's favorite colors. The florist asked if I wanted a congratulatory balloon. I laughed. No, she's 22 now. She's probably too grown for balloons. The young florist smiled. I don't think anyone's ever too grown to know someone is proud of them. I remembered those words later, over and over again. The drive to the university took nearly 2 hours. Traffic was heavier than expected. Cars filled with proud parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, families carrying flowers and cameras. Every red light felt longer than the last. Still, I wasn't impatient. I was enjoying the anticipation. The closer I got, the happier I became. When I finally turned onto campus, my breath caught. Graduation banners hung from nearly every light pole. Students in black gowns laughed together across the sidewalks. Parents snapped photographs beneath blooming oak trees. Everywhere I looked, people were celebrating. It felt beautiful. I parked farther away than I'd hoped. My knees weren't what they used to be. Walking long distances has become difficult after retirement. Still, I didn't mind. Today wasn't about comfort, it was about Maya. As I slowly crossed campus, families smiled at one another. One father proudly carried 2 bouquets. A little boy wore a tiny suit that was much too big. A grandmother almost my age sat wiping tears before the ceremony had even started. We exchanged knowing smiles. Neither of us needed words. Some emotions belong to every grandmother. I finally reached the auditorium. The building buzzed with excitement. Volunteers handed out programs. Music floated through the speakers. Rows of folding chairs stretched farther than I could see. Near the entrance stood a large sign, "Welcome Class of 2025. I stopped beside it. A young volunteer noticed me looking around. "Would you like me to take your picture?" I laughed softly. "Oh, I usually don't like pictures, but today, yes." She took my phone and snapped several photographs. One with me smiling, one holding the flowers, one beside the graduation banner. When she handed my phone back, she said something that warmed my heart. "You must be very proud." I am. So proud. I looked at the picture for a second. I imagined showing it to Maya later. Maybe we'd laugh together. Maybe she'd post one of us online. Maybe we'd frame one. I had already started imagining memories that hadn't happened yet. Then I spotted Angela. She waved from across the courtyard. "Mama!" She hurried over and hugged me tightly. "You look beautiful." "So do you." She looked elegant in a pale green dress, older than I remembered, tired around the eyes. Life had weathered both of us, but today felt lighter. "Where's Maya?" I asked. Angela glanced toward the student staging area. "She's getting organized with her department. I'll go surprise her." Angela reached out almost instinctively. No, the word came too quickly. She immediately forced a smile. "I mean, they're lining everyone up. They're not letting family back there." I nodded, of course. That made sense, or at least I told myself it did. The ceremony wouldn't begin for another 30 minutes. Families slowly filled the seats. Laughter echoed around the hall. Every few moments, someone would recognize another family. Hugs, pictures, happy tears. I loved watching it. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Maya. "Glad you made it. The ceremony starts at 10. No heart emoji, no excitement, just one short sentence. I stared at it longer than I should have. For a moment, I almost typed back, "I love you." Instead, I simply wrote, "Can't wait to see you. So proud of you." She never replied. I didn't think much of it then. Students were busy. Phones disappeared. That was normal. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. The music changed. Faculty members began walking onto the stage. Everyone stood. The graduates followed behind them. Hundreds of black gowns, hundreds of smiling faces. Then I saw her, Maya. She looked absolutely beautiful. Confident, elegant. The gold honor cord rested around her neck. Her smile was brighter than I'd ever seen. My heart swelled. Without thinking, I stood and waved. "Maya!" My voice disappeared beneath the applause. She looked toward the audience. Her eyes passed over my section. For just a second, our eyes met. I smiled as wide as I could. She looked directly at me. Then she turned her head away. No waves, no smile, nothing. It happened so quickly that I questioned whether I'd imagined it. Maybe she hadn't actually seen me. Maybe the lights were too bright. Maybe she was nervous. I clung to every possible explanation because the truth hadn't occurred to me yet. The ceremony began. Names were called one after another, degrees awarded, families cheered. Every passing minute brought us closer to the moment I dreamed about for 20 years. I held the bouquet tighter in my lap. Soon, I'd finally get to hug my granddaughter. I had no idea that before I ever reached her, someone would quietly ask me a question that would make my entire world begin to unravel. The ceremony lasted nearly 2 hours. Every speech felt longer than the last. But I didn't mind. Not today. Today wasn't about the speeches. It wasn't about the dean. It wasn't about the applause. It was about one name, one young woman, one dream that had taken 20 years to become real. Every few minutes, I'd glance at the program in my lap. Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, Maya Brooks. Even seeing her name printed there made me smile. I traced the letters with my finger like they were something sacred. Beside me, Angela dabbed at her eyes. "Can you believe she's graduating?" she whispered. I shook my head. It feels like yesterday she was learning to write her own name. Angela smiled. "I remember when she'd make you read the same bedtime story 5 times. I laughed. It wasn't 5, it was 7. We both laughed quietly. For a moment, everything felt normal. The graduates stood one by one as different colleges were recognized. Business, education, nursing, engineering. Finally, the announcer's voice echoed across the auditorium. "Will the graduates from the College of Engineering please rise?" Hundreds of students stood together, black gowns, golden cords, bright futures. My heart pounded. "This is it," I whispered. Names began slowly, one after another. Families erupted into applause. Some screamed so loudly the announcer had to pause. Then I heard it. Maya Brooks. My entire body reacted before my mind did. I jumped to my feet. "That's my baby!" I clapped until my hands hurt. The bouquet nearly slipped from my arm. Angela stood beside me, applauding too. Maya crossed the stage gracefully. She shook the university president's hand, accepted her diploma, smiled for the official photographer. For just 1 second, she looked exactly like the little girl who used to run through my kitchen wearing oversized rain boots. I cried openly. I didn't care who saw. 20 years. Every overtime shift, every holiday is skipped, every new dress I never bought, every vacation I never took, every dollar saved. It all felt worth it. As the graduates tossed their caps into the air, the auditorium exploded with cheers. Families hugged each other. Children climbed over chairs. People hurried toward the exits. Everyone wanted photographs. I carefully stood. My knees protested immediately. Angela offered her arm. "You okay?" "I've waited 20 years. My knees can wait another 5 minutes." She smiled. Together we slowly followed the crowd outside. The courtyard had transformed into organized chaos. Graduates hugged their parents, friends posed with balloons, photographers shouted directions, flowers changed hands, laughter filled every corner. I scanned hundreds of black gowns looking for Maya. There she is. Angela pointed toward the fountain, about 50 yards away. Maya stood surrounded by several people, young professionals, nicely dressed adults, one older couple, a tall man in an expensive navy suit. Everyone seemed to be congratulating her. I smiled. Let's go. As we walked closer, I noticed something strange. The people around Maya didn't look like college students. They looked wealthy. Designer handbags, luxury watches, tailored suits. One woman wore shoes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I thought perhaps they were employers, maybe internship supervisors. Engineering companies often attended graduation. That had to be it. I wasn't intimidated. Today wasn't about money. Today was about family. When we were about 20 feet away, I saw Maya glance in our direction. She definitely saw us this time. I smiled and lifted the bouquet slightly. Her smile disappeared. Not faded, disappeared. She leaned toward the young man standing beside her and whispered something. He turned around, looked directly at us, then looked back at Maya. She nodded. My steps slowed. Something inside me tightened. Angela noticed too. You okay? I don't know. We kept walking. The university photographer approached Maya's group. Family photo. Everyone moved together. The older couple stood beside Maya. The young man placed an arm around her waist. The others arranged themselves naturally. I waited. Surely she'd wave us over. Surely she'd say, Grandma, Mom, come here. Instead, the photographer looked toward us. Would you ladies like to join? Before I could answer, Maya spoke. No. She smiled politely. We're good. The photographer nodded. All right. He snapped 3 pictures. Click, click, click. Each flash felt strangely distant. I wasn't hurt yet, only confused. Perhaps they wanted one picture with his family first. There will be dozens of photos today. No reason to worry. I told myself not to overthink it. Again. Love has a way of inventing explanations before accepting painful truths. After the photographer left, I finally reached her. Maya. She turned. For a brief second, I expected the hug I'd imagined for months. Instead, she froze. Her smile became tight, almost rehearsed. Hi. Just one word. Hi. Not grandma, not you came, just hi. I forced a smile anyway. Oh, sweetheart, you were incredible. I'm so proud of you. I held out the bouquet. I brought these for you. She looked at the flowers, then glanced at the people standing around her. No one spoke. The silence stretched. Finally, she accepted them with only one hand. Thanks, thanks. That single word landed harder than I expected. The little girl who once hugged handmade birthday cards like treasure now accepted 20 years of love, the way someone accepts a restaurant receipt. I looked toward the young man beside her. He extended his hand politely. I'm Daniel. His smile was friendly, professional. I'm Maya's fiance. Fiance? I blinked. She had mentioned dating someone, but engagement? When? Maya interrupted. It happened a few months ago. Oh, I wish you'd told me. We've been busy. Busy. That word again. Always busy. I nodded slowly. Congratulations. Daniel smiled warmly. Thank you. Then he asked the simplest question, the kind strangers ask every day without thinking. And you are? Before I could answer, before I could even open my mouth, Maya answered for me. Oh, a tiny pause, barely noticeable. I waited. Grandmother. The woman who raised me. The person who paid for college. Anything at all. Instead, she smiled politely. She's an old family friend. Family friend. My ears rang. For a moment, I genuinely wondered if I'd heard her correctly. family friend? I stared at her. Surely she'd laugh. Surely she'd say she was joking. She didn't. Daniel smiled kindly and shook my hand. It's nice meeting you. I couldn't speak. Angela stood completely still beside me. Even she looked stunned. Then Daniel's mother stepped forward. She wrapped Maya in a hug. We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Daniel smiled. My parents have been talking about this day for months. His father laughed. She's part of the family now. Part of the family. The words echoed inside me. Part of the family. I wanted to ask, then what was I? But my voice refused to work. I stood there smiling politely, while the granddaughter I'd raised introduced me, as if I were someone who'd simply known the family for a long time. I still wasn't prepared for what came next, because a few minutes later, I would overhear a conversation that would finally explain exactly why Maya had erased me from her life. And the reason was far more deliberate than simple embarrassment. The next morning, I woke before the alarm. For a long moment, I simply stared at the ceiling. The silence inside my little apartment felt different now, heavier. Not because of what Alicia had said, but because for the first time in 20 years, I realized I had spent my entire life preparing for someone else's future without ever asking if there would still be a place for me in it. I slowly sat up and looked toward the small cedar chest beside my bed. Inside were 20 years of memories, tuition receipts, birthday cards, drawings Alicia made in kindergarten, letters she wrote from summer camp, every report card, every acceptance letter, every achievement she had ever mailed me. I had saved every single one. To me, they weren't papers, they were proof. Proof that every sacrifice had meant something. I carried the chest onto the living room floor. Dust floated through the morning sunlight as I opened it. The smell of old paper filled the room. One by one, I laid everything out across the coffee table. The first tuition receipt, $980, community preschool, paid in full. I smiled despite myself. I remembered working double shifts that month because the transmission on my old truck had failed. I had walked to work for almost 6 weeks. Never told anyone. The second receipt, elementary school uniforms, then piano lessons, science camp, middle school textbooks, private tutoring after her sophomore year. Every year, every semester, every payment. There were hundreds of receipts, thousands of canceled checks, folders carefully labeled by year. I wasn't keeping records because I expected repayment. I kept them because every payment reminded me that Alicia was one step closer to a better life. That had always been enough, until now. A knock interrupted my thoughts. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn. She carried 2 cups of coffee. You've been awake since sunrise, she said. I saw your lights. I invited her inside. She looked around at the mountain of paperwork covering my table. My goodness, you've kept everything. I couldn't throw them away. She picked up one tuition invoice, 20 years. I nodded. She looked at me carefully. Are you planning something? No. I just wanted to remember. She sat quietly for a moment. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. What happened yesterday? I hesitated. Then I told her everything. The boutique, the manager, the embarrassment, Alicia asking me not to come looking like me. Mrs. Evelyn didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she placed her coffee down. You know what hurts most? I looked at her. It isn't what Alicia said. It's that she believed you'd agree. That sentence landed harder than anything else, because she was right. Alicia hadn't expected resistance. She expected obedience, like I had always given. I defended her automatically. She's under pressure. Graduation is stressful. She's just nervous. Mrs. Evelyn smiled sadly. Grace, I've known you for 15 years. You always defend the people hurting you. I didn't answer, because again, she was right. She looked around the apartment. You raised her. You carried that family. You buried your own dreams. and somehow you've convinced yourself you're the embarrassing one. I stared into my coffee. After she left, I couldn't focus, so I decided to organize everything. Maybe keeping busy would quiet my thoughts. Instead, I found something I had forgotten existed: a worn blue envelope tucked beneath an old tax folder. On the front, in childish handwriting, it simply said, "For Grandma, open when I graduate." I froze. I didn't remember this. Carefully, I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. The edges had turned yellow with age. Across the top, written in large, uneven letters, was "My Promise." I recognized the handwriting immediately. Alicia, age 10. I unfolded it. My eyes filled before I reached the second sentence. "Dear Grandma, thank you for paying for my school. Mommy says you work very hard. When I grow up, I will buy you a big house. I will never let you be lonely. I will always tell everyone you are my grandma because I'm proud of you. On my graduation day, I want you to sit in the front row. I want everyone to clap for you because none of this would happen without you. Love forever, Alicia." I couldn't breathe. The tears came without warning. Not because of what she wrote, because of what had happened to the little girl who believed those words. I folded the letter carefully, held it against my chest, and cried harder than I had in years. Not angry tears, grieving tears. Grieving someone who was still alive. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Alicia. I answered immediately. Her voice sounded rushed. "Grandma, I need a favor." My heart lifted despite everything. "Of course." She hesitated. "Can you transfer another $4,000? I blinked. "For what?" "There are graduation expenses. The venue was upgraded. The photographer. The after party. Everyone's families are helping. I just need this one last payment." One last payment. How many times had I heard those words? Every year, every semester, every emergency. Always just one last payment. I looked across the room at the stacks of receipts, the tuition folders, the canceled checks. The childhood promise is still sitting beside me. I asked quietly, "How much have I already spent?" Silence. "I don't know. I never kept track." "I did." Another silence. Longer this time. Then she laughed nervously. "You always keep everything. Grandma, it's only money. Only money." I looked around my tiny apartment, the peeling paint, the worn furniture, the patched carpet, the heater that barely worked, the old refrigerator that rattled every night. 20 years of only money, money that could have fixed my roof, bought me a reliable car, paid for my own retirement, taken me on vacations I'd never had. Instead, it built someone else's future. I wasn't angry about that. I had chosen it. What hurt? I heard her dismiss it so easily. I took a slow breath. Then, for the first time in 20 years, I said one word Alicia had never expected to hear from me. "No." Silence. Complete silence. Then, "What?" "I can't. You've always helped." "I know, but I can't this time." Her voice changed instantly, cold. "So you're abandoning me now?" I closed my eyes. "No. I've been carrying you. I just can't carry everything anymore." She hung up. No goodbye, no thank you, just silence. I stared at the phone for several minutes. Oddly enough, I didn't feel guilty. I felt exhausted, as though I had been carrying weight for decades and had finally set it down. I looked again at the little girl's promise. "I'll always tell everyone you're my grandma." I whispered softly into the empty room. I hope that little girl finds her way back, because somewhere beneath the designer clothes, expensive education, the polished image, I still believed she existed. I just didn't know if it was graduation day, would be too late to find her. Graduation morning arrived faster than I expected. After everything that had happened the day before, I barely slept. I must have replayed our phone call 100 times. "So you're abandoning me now?" Those words echoed through my apartment long after midnight. Yet somehow, when the sun finally rose, hope still found a way into my heart. Maybe today would be different. Maybe yesterday had simply been stressful. Maybe once the ceremony ended, my granddaughter would hug me, laugh about everything, and we'd move on. Love has a strange way of refusing to surrender, even when common sense already has. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror wearing the navy blue dress I'd bought months earlier. For the first time, I wasn't smiling. I adjusted Harold's pearl necklace around my neck and looked at his photograph. You always tell me people reveal who they really are when success arrives. I paused. I prayed you were wrong. I picked up the bouquet from the kitchen table. Fresh white lilies, red roses, baby's breath woven around the edges. The florist had done beautiful work. I smiled sadly. I hope she likes them. The drive to the university felt different than it had the day before. Yesterday I was excited. Today I was nervous. Not about the graduation, about seeing my granddaughter. When I reached campus, the parking lots were overflowing. Families walked in every direction carrying flowers, balloons, stuffed bears, cameras, and enormous smiles. I watched fathers adjusting ties, mothers fixing graduation caps, grandparents wiping away tears before the ceremony had even begun. Everywhere I looked, people were celebrating. I whispered quietly, "This is your day, sweetheart." Even after everything, I meant it. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The university president spoke about resilience. The dean reminded students that success wasn't measured by titles, but by character. I remember thinking, I hope they believe that. Then the engineering graduates stood. One by one, their names echoed through the auditorium. When they finally called, Maya Brooks, the room erupted with applause. I stood immediately. "That's my granddaughter." I clapped until my palms burned. Angela cried beside me. I cried too. Watching Maya cross that stage, accept her diploma, and smile for the cameras filled me with the same pride I'd carried for 20 years. Nothing, not even our argument, could erase that. She had done it. She had become the first person in our family to graduate from college. For a few beautiful minutes, none of the hurt mattered. The ceremony ended. Graduation caps flew into the air. Families rushed toward the courtyard. I held the bouquet tightly as Angela and I slowly made our way outside. The campus looked like a celebration. Music played from loudspeakers. Graduates hugged one another. Parents laughed through tears. Photographers barked instructions. Children chased balloons across the grass. It was exactly the kind of day I'd imagined for years. Then I spotted Maya. She stood near the university fountain. A crowd surrounded her. Daniel, his parents, several professionally dressed guests, some professors, a photographer. Everyone seemed excited. I smiled. There she is. Angela squeezed my arm. "Go." I nodded. My knees hurt, but somehow, that morning, they didn't matter. Every step felt like 20 years unfolding beneath my feet. When I was only a few yards away, Maya looked directly at me. For just a second, our eyes met. I smiled. She didn't. Instead, I watched something change across her face. Not sadness, not surprising, calculation. She quickly glanced toward Daniel's parents, then toward two elegantly dressed women standing nearby. One of them wore diamonds large enough to catch the sunlight. The other held a designer handbag I'd only ever seen in magazines. Maya looked back at me and immediately looked away. A strange feeling settled into my stomach. I ignored it. I kept walking. When I finally reached the group, I smiled warmly. "Congratulations, sweetheart." I held out the bouquet. I've never been prouder. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Daniel smiled politely. His parents looked at me curiously. The two wealthy women exchanged confused glances. Maya didn't take the flowers. Instead, she stepped slightly backward, almost as if she wanted distance between us. I forced another smile. "Honey, I brought your favorite flowers." She finally accepted them, only with one hand, barely looking at me. "Thanks. Just thanks." Not grandma, not you came, not even a hug, only thanks. The silence became uncomfortable. Daniel looked between us. I'm sorry. He smiled kindly. I don't think we've officially met. I'm Daniel. He extended his hand. I shook it. It's wonderful to finally meet you. You've made Maya very happy. He smiled. She talks about everyone who's important to her. I looked toward Maya. She avoided my eyes. Daniel continued. So, how do you know Maya? The question was innocent, completely innocent. My mouth opened. I'm her. Before I could finish, Maya interrupted. Oh! She laughed softly. She's... Another pause. Tiny. Barely noticeable. Yet somehow, it lasted forever. She's just someone from my hometown. I blinked. Someone from my hometown? I stared at her. Perhaps she'd correct herself. Perhaps she'd laugh. She didn't. Daniel smiled politely. Oh, it's nice meeting you. One of the women beside him asked, Were you one of Maya's teachers? Maya answered before I could. No. She just knew my family growing up. I knew my family. The words hit harder than a slap. 20 years, reduced to someone who knew the family. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Angela stood frozen beside me. Even she seemed unable to believe what she had heard. Then something happened I'll never forget. One of Daniel's relatives looked directly at me, smiled kindly, and asked, So, do you know her parents well? Before I could answer, Maya looked directly into my eyes, and with the calmest voice I'd ever heard, she said, I'm sorry. A small, polite smile crossed her face. Do I know you? The world stopped. Everything around me disappeared. The music, the laughter, the cameras, the conversations. All I could hear were those 5 words. Do I know you? At first, I genuinely believed she was joking. I even smiled, waiting for the punchline. It never came. She looked at me exactly the way you'd look at a stranger who had mistaken you for someone else. Daniel frowned. His parents looked confused. The 2 women exchanged awkward glances. One of them whispered, I think she has the wrong graduate. My fingers tightened around the bouquet. Maya, my voice barely existed. It's me. For just 1 second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt. It vanished almost immediately. She lowered her voice. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. Someone else. 20 years, and suddenly, I was someone else. I looked toward Angela. She stepped forward. Maya, what are you doing? Maya's smile disappeared. Mom, please, not here. Not here. Those 2 words explained everything. She wasn't confused. She wasn't joking. She was ashamed. Ashamed of me. Ashamed that the woman was standing in a simple navy blue dress, holding flowers, might somehow embarrass the polished image she'd spent 4 years creating. One of Daniel's relatives tried to ease the tension. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Maya nodded quickly. Exactly. Then she turned back toward the photographer. As I was saying, just like that, the conversation continued, as though I had never existed, as though 20 years had never happened. I stood there for another few seconds, unable to move, unable to understand how someone I'd loved more than my own life could erase me so easily. Finally, I looked down at the bouquet. Slowly, I placed it on a nearby bench. She didn't even notice. I turned around, without saying another word, without making a scene, without demanding an explanation. I simply walked away. Behind me, the photographer called out cheerfully, Everyone smiles. The camera flashed. Click, click, click. Each shutter sounded like another piece of my heart breaking. I had imagined this day thousands of times. In every version, my granddaughter ran into my arms. In every version, we cried together. In every version, we celebrated everything we'd survived. Never, not once, did I imagine that after 20 years of sacrifice, the child I had raised would look me in the eyes and pretend she had never known me. And as I reached the edge of the courtyard, my phone began to ring. The name on the screen changed everything. As I reached the edge of the courtyard, my phone began to ring. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. My hands were trembling so badly I almost dropped the phone. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but something inside me whispered, "Answer it." I took a deep breath. "Hello?" A calm, professional voice answered. "Good afternoon. Am I speaking with Mrs. Grace Whitmore?" "Yes. My name is Rebecca Collins. I'm calling from Whitmore Educational Foundation." For a second, I frowned. "I think you've got the wrong number." "No, ma'am. We've been trying to reach you all morning." My heart wasn't in the conversation. "I'm actually at my granddaughter's graduation." "I understand. Our chairman asked that we speak with you today, if possible." "Chairman?" I looked back toward the crowd. Maya was still surrounded by photographers, laughing, smiling, living a moment I'd spent 2 decades helping create. "I'm afraid now isn't the best time." Rebecca hesitated. "I completely understand. But I believe Mr. Samuel Whitmore is already on campus." That name caught my attention. Samuel Whitmore. Everyone in Georgia knew that name. Founder of Whitmore Construction Group, one of the state's largest engineering firms. The company built bridges, schools, hospitals, entire neighborhoods. Even after retirement, I still remembered seeing Mr. Whitmore on local news every few months donating millions to education. Why would someone like that be looking for me? There must be some mistake. There isn't. He specifically requested to meet Mrs. Grace Whitmore after today's ceremony. My maiden name was Brooks. "I've never worked for your company." "I know. Would you mind waiting near the administration building? He'll explain everything personally." Before I could ask another question, the call ended. I stood perfectly still. None of it made sense. Angela caught up to me. "Mama," she gently touched my shoulder. "You okay?" I looked at the phone. "I don't know. Who was it?" I explained the strange conversation. She frowned. "Whitmore? That can't be right." "I know." For several moments, we simply stood there. Finally, Angela sighed. "Let's just go home." I nodded. "You're probably right." Just as we turned toward the parking lot, a voice called out behind us. "Mrs. Grace Brooks?" I turned. A young man in a navy business suit hurried toward us. He looked to be in his early 30s, neatly dressed, professional. He carried a leather portfolio. "Mrs. Brooks?" "Yes?" He smiled warmly. "I'm David Foster, executive assistant to Mr. Samuel Whitmore." He extended his hand. "I'm very sorry to approach you unexpectedly." Mr. Whitmore asked if I'd escort you to him. I blinked. "This isn't a mistake?" "No, ma'am. He's been looking forward to meeting you." Angela and I exchanged confused looks. David noticed. "I understand this seems unusual, but if you'll come with me, it's only a short walk." Against every instinct, I followed him. We walked across campus toward the engineering building. The farther we went, the quieter everything became. Graduation celebrations faded behind us. Eventually, we reached a small courtyard tucked behind the administration offices. There stood an elderly gentleman in a charcoal suit, silver hair, kind eyes, a polished cane resting lightly in one hand. Even before David spoke, I recognized him. Samuel Whitmore. He smiled the moment he saw me. "Mrs. Brooks." He stepped forward. "It's an honor." I looked around. Surely he meant someone else. "Sir, I think you're confusing me with another Grace." He chuckled softly. "No, I've known exactly who you are for nearly 20 years. 20 years? My confusion deepened. "I don't understand." He gestured toward a nearby bench. "May we sit?" I nodded slowly. Once seated, he looked directly at me. "Do you remember opening an education savings account at Savannah Community Bank 20 years ago?" My eyes widened. "Yes. That account changed my life." I stared at him. "How?" He smiled. "My daughter managed that branch." I remembered instantly. Emily Whitmore, the young bank manager who always greeted me with coffee whenever I made my monthly deposits. She never laughed when I deposited only $20. never questioned why I came every month. She simply smiled. You haven't missed a month yet. I'd almost forgotten her. Samuel continued. Emily came home every month talking about you. I blinked. Me? She said there was an elderly school secretary quietly building a college fund for her granddaughter. Sometimes you deposit $20, sometimes 50, sometimes only 10, but you never missed. He smiled. She said she'd never seen discipline like that. I felt tears forming again. I was just doing what any grandmother would. Samuel shook his head. No, you were doing what very few people would. He reached into his briefcase, pulled out a worn folder. I placed it in my hands. I opened it slowly. Inside were photocopies of my earliest deposit slips, my handwriting, my signatures, 20 years preserved. I don't understand. He smiled. When Emily became ill, his voice softened. She often spoke about people who inspired her. You were one of them. I felt my throat tighten. I didn't know she passed away 5 years ago. I'm so sorry. So was I. He nodded sadly. Before she died, she convinced me to create a scholarship program. Not for wealthy students, not for the smartest students, for students whose success depended on someone quietly sacrificing behind the scenes. He looked directly into my eyes. We named it the Grace Brooks Family Legacy Scholarship. I couldn't breathe. No, there must be another Grace Brooks. There isn't. My hands began to shake. Samuel smiled. Emily never forgot you. Neither did I. I've followed your granddaughter's academic journey from the very beginning. You have? He nodded. Every scholarship application, every tuition payment, every semester. We knew exactly who was making those payments. I stared at him in disbelief. You knew? We admired you. He paused. Today. I wanted to finally thank you. My eyes filled with tears. For what? He smiled. For reminding my daughter that generosity still existed. A long silence settled between us. Finally, he opened another folder. This year's Family Legacy recipient has been selected. Inside was a beautiful certificate. At the bottom, my name appeared as honorary founder. I've never found anything. You found hope. I covered my mouth. Tears spilled freely now. Across campus, I could still hear distant graduation cheers, students celebrating, families taking pictures. None of them knew what was happening in this quiet courtyard. Samuel stood slowly. Mrs. Brooks, I have one more favor to ask. What is it? In exactly 30 minutes, our foundation is presenting this year's scholarship. We would be deeply honored if you would personally hand it to the recipient. I looked down at my simple navy blue dress. My goodness, I don't belong on a stage. Samuel smiled gently. After everything you've done, I can't imagine anyone who belongs there more. For the first time that entire day, I smiled, a real smile. Not because my heart had stopped hurting, it hadn't, but because someone who owed me absolutely nothing, had seen 20 years of invisible love and called it extraordinary. Little did I know, the scholarship ceremony would be attended by dozens of engineering graduates, including Maya. And before the afternoon was over, she would hear my name announced in front of every person she'd tried so hard to impress. I don't remember agreeing to it. One moment, I was sitting on a quiet bench behind the engineering building, still trying to understand how a complete stranger knew about 20 years of my life. The next, I was standing inside the University Conference Center with a name badge pinned to my navy blue dress. It read, Mrs. Grace Brooks, Honorary Founder, Family Legacy Scholarship. I looked at it 3 times. Then I looked at Samuel Whitmore. I think you've made a mistake. He smiled. I've been told to say that whenever someone compliments you. I laughed softly through my tears. That sounds like me. He gestured toward the ballroom doors. Inside, university staff hurried from table to table making final preparations. A banner stretched across the stage. Whitmore Family Legacy Scholarship Ceremony. Rows of chairs filled the room. Fresh flowers decorated every table. A projector displayed photographs of previous scholarship recipients. It was elegant, far more elegant than anything I had expected. I leaned toward Samuel. I thought graduation was over. It is. This is a private reception for graduating engineering students, donors, faculty members, and selected families. I nodded slowly. Then something caught my attention. Several familiar faces walked through the entrance, engineering graduates, still wearing their gowns. Among them, I recognized Daniel, walking beside his parents, laughing. Then, a few seconds later, Maya. She entered the ballroom holding the bouquet I had given her. My bouquet. The same flowers she had barely acknowledged. She hadn't thrown them away, for reasons I couldn't explain that mattered to me. Samuel noticed the direction of my gaze. Is that your granddaughter? I nodded quietly. She just graduated. He smiled. Wonderful. I didn't answer. There was nothing wonderful about what had happened. Not yet. A university coordinator approached us. Mr. Whitmore, we'll begin in 10 minutes. He nodded. Excellent. She turned toward me. And Mrs. Brooks, we're so honored you're here. I smiled politely. Thank you. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was the scholarship certificate, along with a short speech. I don't give speeches, I whispered. She laughed. Everyone says that. You'll do just fine. Across the room, I noticed Maya scanning the guests. Then her eyes landed on me. She froze. Confusion spread across her face. She looked toward Daniel, then back at me. I could almost see the questions racing through her mind. Why was I here? Who invited me? Before she could walk over, an announcer asked everyone to take their seats. The room quieted. Samuel leaned toward me. Just be yourself. I've never been anyone else. Exactly. The lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the stage. The university president welcomed everyone. He spoke about education, opportunity, community. Then he introduced Samuel Whitmore. The audience applauded warmly as Samuel approached the podium. He thanked the faculty. Congratulations to the graduates. Then, his voice became softer. Every year, our foundation honors someone whose sacrifices changed not only one life, but generations to come. A photograph appeared on the screen behind him, not me, of an old bank deposit slip, $20, dated nearly 20 years earlier. Whispers spread across the room. Samuel continued. 20 years ago, a school secretary earning an ordinary salary began making monthly deposits into an education fund. Some months she deposited $50, some months 20. One month, he smiled, only 10. Soft laughter echoed through the ballroom, but she never missed, not once. Another photograph appeared. Tuition receipts, old report cards, college invoices, savings ledgers. Every image represented years of quiet sacrifice. No one knew those were mine, not yet. I glanced toward Maya. She leaned forward in her chair. Her expression had completely changed. Confusion, recognition, disbelief. Samuel continued. She skipped vacations. She postponed replacing her car. She repaired old clothes instead of buying new ones. She quietly gave away pieces of her own comfort so that one little girl could one day wear a graduation gown. The ballroom had become completely silent. I saw Daniel glance toward Maya. She looked pale. Samuel smiled gently. My late daughter often told me, Dad, if everyone loved the way this woman loves her granddaughter, the world would be a kinder place. He paused. I never forgot those words. Neither did I. I felt tears welling again. Samuel looked directly toward me. Mrs. Grace Brooks, would you please join me on stage? The room erupted into applause. For a second, I couldn't move. People actually stood. Faculty members, business leaders, students, parents. One by one, they rose to their feet. A standing ovation for me. Not because I had built bridges. Not because I owned companies. Not because I was wealthy. simply because I had loved someone without expecting anything in return. My legs trembled as I walked toward the stage. Every step felt unreal. When I reached Samuel, he embraced me warmly. The applause continued, longer than I ever imagined. I looked across the audience. Then I saw Maya. She wasn't clapping, she was crying. Not quietly, not politely. Tears streamed down her face. Daniel looked from her to me and back again. Then he whispered something. I couldn't hear the words, but I watched Maya lower her head into her hands. Samuel waited until the applause settled. Then he spoke the words that changed everything. The anonymous grandmother whose sacrifices funded one young woman's education is the very woman standing beside me. A collective gasp swept across the room. Daniel's mother covered her mouth. His father stared in disbelief. Several professors looked toward Maya. Even the university president seemed stunned. Samuel continued, "Many of you celebrated one graduate this morning, but today, I ask you to celebrate the woman who made that graduation possible." The applause returned, even louder. This time, I noticed something I hadn't expected. Daniel stood, then his parents, then every engineering graduate. Even students who had never met me rose to their feet. Only one person remained seated, Maya. She looked completely shattered, not because people knew the truth, because she finally understood. Everyone now knew what she had tried so desperately to hide. Samuel handed me the scholarship certificate, then quietly stepped away from the microphone, leaving me alone, facing hundreds of people. I looked down at the speech they had prepared. Then I folded it. I placed it inside my purse. I couldn't read someone else's words, not today. I stepped closer to the microphone. My voice shook. I've never spoken in front of this many people. Gentle laughter filled the room. "So, if I make mistakes, you'll forgive me." More smiles. I looked around the ballroom. Then I spoke from my heart. I didn't save money because I wanted recognition. I saved it because I loved a little girl. I didn't work overtime because I wanted applause. I worked overtime because children shouldn't have to choose between dreams and tuition. The room remained perfectly still. I've learned something today. People notice success. They photograph success. They celebrate success. But very few people notice sacrifice while it's happening. I paused, looking directly at the engineering graduates. If someone quietly believed in you, if someone skipped meals, worked extra hours, gave up dreams so you could chase yours, please never make them wonder whether it mattered. Silence. Absolute silence. Several people wiped away tears. I didn't look at Maya. I couldn't, because if I had, I wasn't sure I could finish. I smiled softly. "Thank you for seeing someone who spent most of her life being invisible." The audience stirred once more. The applause seemed endless. And as I stepped away from the microphone, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. A voice, broken by tears, called out the one word I hadn't heard all day. "Grandma. Grandma." For a moment, I wasn't even sure I'd heard it. The ballroom had gone completely silent. Hundreds of people turned toward the sound, slowly. I looked over my shoulder. There she was, Maya, standing in the center aisle. Her graduation cap was gone. Her carefully applied makeup had been ruined by tears. The confident young engineer who had smiled for the cameras only an hour earlier was nowhere to be found. In her place stood the little girl I'd spent 20 years protecting. Only now, she looked completely broken. She took one hesitant step toward me, then another. "Grandma, I'm so sorry." Her voice cracked before she could finish. I didn't move, not because I wanted to punish her, because I honestly didn't know what to do. For 20 years, I'd imagined this graduation day. I'd imagined hugs, pictures, laughter. Never once had I imagined standing on a stage while my granddaughter cried before hundreds of strangers. Daniel quietly stood from his chair. He looked at Maya, then at me. His expression wasn't angry. I was confused, deeply confused. He walked toward Maya slowly. Maya. His voice was gentle. What is everyone talking about? She covered her face. I lied. The room remained silent. Daniel frowned. Lied about what? She looked at me, then back at him. My grandmother. She couldn't finish. Daniel waited patiently. The woman I told everyone was just someone from my hometown. Her voice collapsed into sobs. She raised me. The ballroom became so quiet you could hear people breathing. Daniel looked toward me, then back at Maya. You told me your grandparents passed away years ago. She nodded. I know. You told my parents. Your mother paid for college. Another nod. I know. You told everyone. You earned scholarships for everything. Maya slowly sank to her knees. I know. I lied. Daniel stepped backward, not dramatically, not angrily, simply because the truth had shaken him. His mother quietly wiped tears from her face. His father stared at the floor. No one knew what to say. I looked at Maya, still kneeling, still crying. Every instinct inside me wanted to walk over, lift her up, and tell her everything would be all right. That's what grandmothers do. But another part of me, the part that had quietly broken beside that fountain earlier, couldn't move. Not yet. Finally, Maya looked directly at me. I was ashamed. The words echoed through the room. I thought, she struggled to breathe. I thought people would judge me. I thought they'd think I came from nothing. She laughed bitterly through her tears. The truth is, I came from everything. No one interrupted. I had love. I had someone who believed in me. I had someone who worked herself into exhaustion just so I could dream. She looked at her own hands, and I threw all of that away because I wanted strangers to think I was impressive. Daniel slowly walked closer again. His voice was almost a whisper. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at him with unbearable sadness. Because I thought, if people knew where I came from, they wouldn't respect me. Daniel closed his eyes. My father grew up in a trailer. My mother cleaned hotel rooms. You never asked, you assumed. The words hit Maya like another wave. She buried her face in her hands. I ruined everything. Samuel Whitmore quietly stepped forward, then stopped. He understood this wasn't his moment. It wasn't the universities. It wasn't the audiences. This belonged to my grandmother and the child she'd raised. The ballroom waited, patiently, respectfully. Finally, I walked toward Maya. Every step felt heavy, not because I was angry, because forgiveness is never as easy as people imagine, especially when love has been humiliated in public. I stopped in front of her. She refused to look up. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I know. You deserve so much better. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me. Again. I know. She finally lifted her head. Her eyes were swollen, red, filled with regret. I took a slow breath, then asked the one question that had lived inside my heart since the courtyard. Were you ashamed of me? I paused. Or were you ashamed that your friends might discover who truly sacrificed for you? She froze. The question seemed to reach somewhere deeper than guilt. Long seconds passed. Then, with complete honesty, she answered, I wasn't ashamed of you. Fresh tears rolled down her face. I was ashamed of myself. She looked around the ballroom. I spent 4 years pretending to be someone else. I wanted everyone to believe I built my life alone. I wanted to fit into rooms where everyone came from money. I convinced myself that if people met you, they'd see the truth. And the truth scared me. I listened quietly. The truth was that everything I had came from someone else's sacrifice. Her shoulders shook. I kept telling myself I'd tell everyone later, after graduation, after the engagement, after I got the job. There was always another excuse. She covered her mouth. Until today. I nodded slowly. Today. You chose to erase me. She closed her eyes. I know. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Silence settled between us. The audience watched, but no longer felt like strangers. Somewhere in the room, someone quietly cried. Daniel finally stepped beside Maya. He looked at me sincerely. Mrs. Brooks, I'm so sorry. You don't owe me an apology. I do. I asked how you knew Maya. His voice broke, and I believed the answer. He lowered his head. I should have noticed. I gently touched his arm. You couldn't have known. He nodded, then looked at Maya. I don't care where you came from. I care why you lied. She couldn't answer, because there wasn't a good answer. Only fear. Fear of not belonging. Fear of being judged. Fear that success wasn't enough unless it looked perfect. Samuel quietly approached. Mrs. Brooks, if you'd like, we can clear the room. I looked around, then I shook my head. No, this isn't something to hide. I turned back to Maya. When you were 10 years old, her eyes widened. You wrote me a letter. Confusion crossed her face. I still have it. I brought it with me today. I reached into my purse, carefully unfolded the worn notebook paper. The edges were yellow now, soft with age. I handed it to her. She stared at the familiar handwriting, then began reading aloud. Dear Grandma, her voice immediately cracked. Thank you for paying for my school. Tears fell onto the paper. I will always tell everyone you're my grandma. She couldn't continue. The letter slipped from her trembling hands. She collapsed against me, crying harder than I'd ever seen. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgot who I was. For the first time all day, I wrapped my arms around her. Not because the pain had disappeared. It hadn't. Not because trust had magically returned. It hadn't. I hugged her because love doesn't stop being love, even after it's wounded. I whispered into her ear, the little girl who wrote that letter, she's still inside you. You just have to decide whether you're going to become her again. She held me tighter. I will. I promise. I closed my eyes. Promises, I have learned, were easy to make. Keeping them was where the character lived, and only time would tell me whether this apology was the beginning of redemption, or simply another beautiful speech spoken on an emotional day. People often ask me what happened after that day. They imagine everything ended the moment Maya hugged me in front of that ballroom, that we drove home together, she apologized, that I forgave her, that we all lived happily ever after. Real life doesn't work that way. Forgiveness can happen in a moment. Trust takes much longer. The morning after graduation, my phone rang before 8 o'clock. It was Maya. I watched her name appear on the screen. For nearly a minute, I simply stared at it. Finally, I answered. Good morning. Silence. Then, Grandma, I'm outside. I looked through the living room window. There she was, still wearing yesterday's graduation sweatshirt, hair pulled into a simple ponytail, no makeup, no designer handbag, no polished image, just my granddaughter. I opened the door. She didn't speak. Instead, she held out the bouquet. The same flowers I'd left on the bench. She had carefully wrapped fresh paper around the stems. I picked them up after you left. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I couldn't leave them there. I accepted the bouquet. They're still beautiful. She nodded. So were you. The words hung in the air. Neither of us knew what came next. Finally, I stepped aside. Come in. She looked around my apartment as though she had never really seen it before. The worn sofa, the faded curtains, the old coffee table Harold built 30 years earlier, the patched wallpaper. Everything looked exactly the same, yet somehow, she looked at it differently. Her eyes stopped on my winter coat hanging by the front door, the same one I'd worn for 16 years. She slowly reached out and touched the frayed sleeve. I bought a handbag last month, she whispered. It cost more than this coat. I said nothing. She looked away. Then she noticed the cedar chest. It was still open. Inside, 20 years of her life, carefully organized, carefully protected. She knelt beside it, one folder after another. Preschool, elementary school, middle school, high school, college. Every tuition receipt, every report card, every drawing, every birthday card she'd ever made. Then she found the notebook, a small blue notebook filled entirely in my handwriting. She looked at me. "What's this?" I smiled softly. "My prayer journal." She opened it. The very first page read, January 14th, 2005. Lord, please help Maya make friends at her new school. The next page, please let her fever break before morning. Another page, she thinks she's bad at math. Please remind her she's stronger than she believes. Another, she cried because someone laughed at her shoes today. Please protect her heart. Another, college applications go out tomorrow. Calm her fears. Hundreds of entries, hundreds of prayers, every year, every birthday, every exam, every heartbreak, every dream. She slowly closed the notebook. I didn't know. I smiled sadly. You weren't supposed to. Tears rolled silently down her face. I thought I knew how much you loved me. She shook her head. I had no idea. Weeks passed. Maya called every day. Not because I asked her to, because she wanted to. Sometimes we talked for 5 minutes, sometimes an hour. She no longer asked me for money. She asked me for stories. Tell me about Grandpa. What was Mom like when she was little? What was your first job? What was your biggest dream? One afternoon, she asked a question I'd never expected. What did you want to become? I laughed softly. No one's ever asked me that. So, what was it? I looked out the kitchen window. When I was your age, I wanted to be a teacher. What happened? I became responsible. She lowered her eyes. I took that dream away from you. No. I reached across the table and held her hand. You didn't. I chose you, and I'd choose you again. She cried anyway. 3 months later, Maya started her first engineering job. A week after that, she invited me to lunch, not at a fancy restaurant, at the small diner we'd visited when she was little. The waitress recognized us immediately. My goodness, look at you two. It's been years. Maya smiled. I know. She looked at me. I've been away too long. Halfway through lunch, she slid an envelope across the table. What is this? My first paycheck. I laughed. I'm not taking your paycheck. It's not for you, she smiled. It's for the education fund. I frowned. What education fund? She leaned forward. The one we're starting. I stared at her. She took a deep breath. I've already opened the account. I set up automatic transfers every month. I smiled. For your children? She shook her head. For someone else's. I blinked. What? There are little girls out there who need someone to believe in them. Her eyes filled again. I know what that belief can do. I couldn't speak. She continued. I'm calling it the Evelyn Brooks Promise Fund. I covered my mouth. No. Yes. You spent 20 years investing in one little girl. I want to spend the rest of my life investing in many things. For the first time since graduation, I cried tears that carried no pain, only hope. The following spring, Samuel Whitmore called again. Mrs. Brooks, we're holding our annual scholarship banquet. I hope you'll attend. I smiled. I'd love to. The ballroom looked much like it had the year before, only this time, I wasn't nervous. As I entered, students greeted me by name. The faculty hugged me. Past scholarship recipients thanked me. Then I noticed something. Near the front of the room, someone had reserved a chair. A beautiful white card rested on the seat. It read, "Reserved for Mrs. Grace Brooks, front row." I smiled because I remembered another day, another ceremony, another front row, the one my 10-year-old granddaughter had promised me in her letter. She had forgotten, for a while, but not forever. Just before the ceremony began, Maya walked onto the stage. She looked confident, not because of expensive clothes, not because of status, because she finally looked comfortable being herself. She adjusted the microphone. The room became quiet. I was asked to introduce tonight's honorary guest. She smiled toward me. I've written this speech at least 20 times. Gentle laughter filled the room, but every version kept sounding too small. She took a slow breath. When I graduated from college, I believed success meant convincing people I'd built my life alone. She paused. I was wrong. The room listened. Every achievement I've ever received, every opportunity I've ever been given, every door I've ever walked through was opened long before I arrived. She looked directly at me, by a woman who never asked for recognition, a woman who quietly worked overtime, skipped vacations, wore the same coat for years, and somehow convinced herself that she wasn't extraordinary. Her voice broke. She was wrong too. The audience smiled. Then Maya said something I'll never forget. When I was a little girl, I promised my grandmother she'd sit in the front row at my graduation. I broke that promise. Silence. I can never erase that day. But I can spend the rest of my life keeping every promise that comes after it. She looked toward me. Grandma, would you please come to the stage? This time, I didn't hesitate. As I walked forward, the audience stood. Not because of me, because they understood what this moment meant. Maya met me halfway. She didn't shake my hand. She didn't pose for cameras. She simply wrapped both arms around me. Then, without warning, she turned toward the audience, took my hand, raised it high, and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, the greatest investment in my education was never money. It was love." She turned toward me again. So if you remember my name, I ask one thing. Remember hers first. The applause was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not loud, not dramatic, just long. A kind of applause that comes from hearts instead of hands. As we walked off the stage together, I leaned close and whispered, "You kept your promise." She smiled through happy tears. I'm just getting started. I often think back to that graduation day, the day my granddaughter pretended not to know me. For a long time, I believed it was the story's ending. I was wrong. It was only the chapter where pride finally lost and gratitude found its way home. Because degrees can build careers, money can build houses, success can build reputations, but only love, quiet, patient, unrecognized love, has the power to build a family. And if you're listening today, let me leave you with this. Never be ashamed of the hands that helped you climb, because one day, the greatest achievement of your life won't be the stage you stood on. It will be the person waiting in the front row who never stopped believing in you. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to think about the people who quietly sacrificed so you could become who you are today. Sometimes the greatest acts of love happen behind the scenes. A grandparent who worked overtime, a parent who skipped their own dreams, or someone who believed in you long before you believed in yourself. If this story reminded you of someone like that, please leave a sign in the comments. I'd love to know who you're honoring today. And if you enjoy emotional family stories about love, sacrifice, betrayal, and redemption, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. There are many more stories waiting to be told. Until next time, take care of the people who never stopped believing in you.